Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Canary Room. It's, season 3, episode 15 of the show. Coming up today, we've got top tips. We're going to focus on the molt and getting birds through the molt. We've got a bird of the week, which is one of our young Siberian goldfinches. I think it's going to be a Umo for a split Lutino, but we'll see how that molts out. We've got the first phase, really, of the Canary Room remodeling. So you can see behind me that the flight cages have been decommissioned for now. We've got some new cages as well in the Canary Room already, so phase 1 of the change is complete. We've of course got Red Pole Diaries. We've got question time too. And, what would a Canary Room be without some heartache? So we've got some heartache to follow later on in the show as well. I must say a couple of thank yous. Firstly, thank you to Brian Lahori for your very kind donation to the show. Much appreciated, Brian. And thanks to everybody who's been getting in touch with me. I know I get sort of almost daily contact from people, fanciers across the globe. Very, very much appreciated. So thank you all for getting in touch with the show. Grab yourself a cuppa. And as always, sit back and enjoy the show. Regular viewers of the show will remember earlier in the year we paid a visit to the bird rooms of the Yorkie Supreme Stud. So we went to see Steve Dominy and we went to see Bob Pepper as well. At the time, Steve and Bob were in the final throes of writing their book, A Vision of the Perfect Yorkshire. And Steve has very, very kindly sent me a copy of the book, which is here in my hand. And, it's a fascinating read. It's available from Steve and Bob. So if you look on Facebook and you look at the search Yorkie Supreme, you'll find a link to be able to buy it. It's a book that talks about the Golding model. It's a book that talks about the important things to look for in the Yorkshire Canary. But very much more than that, it's a book that looks at colour feeding. It's a book that looks at line breeding and inbreeding. It looks briefly at feather type. It looks about building a stud of successful birds. It's interesting to read that Bob's and Steve's birds go back to, the early 90s, their line. So it's a pure pedigree line. And it really looks at the sort of the history, some of the great fanciers, and also some of the great birds in Yorkshire Canaries. So really well put together by Steve and Bob. Jump onto Facebook. Get your copy now. You will not be disappointed. I don't keep Yorkshire Canaries, but actually as a canary book and a canary read, it's a really, really good read. One of the things it also talks about is some of the etiquette, which is often missed now. And the sort of the etiquette, the gentlemanship, if you like, in the fancy, and so there's some important points made in there, particularly around the exhibition of birds. So really, really good read. Jump onto Facebook, grab your copy of it now. Interestingly, we talk about the show season, or the book talks about the show season, and the show season in the UK is very quickly becoming sort of devastated by the COVID-19 crisis. In the last week, 4 of the big major shows have announced that they won't be running this year, and largely to do with the fact that they are unable to secure venues, which is obviously a challenge. So at this point there are still scheduled to be a number of shows on, but it is a small number and it's decreasing sort of by the week. So we don't know yet in the UK what kind of show season, if we'll have a show season at all. There are a couple of clubs who are looking to progress. Very, very much still too early to call. So we are plugging away in the Canary Room. I've got a couple of birds behind me in show cages doing a little bit of show training. So we are being prepared in case there is a show season. But the way things are looking at the moment, it doesn't look like there will be a great show season at all. That will unfortunately have an impact on the Canary Room. I'd planned to spend most of October, November and early parts of December filming shows and really making them the main body of episodes. You know, as we've looked at this season, it's been a culmination, starting selection, starting breeding, you know, then first round birds coming away, second round birds coming away, preparing the birds for the molt, then preparing the birds for the show season, and then the show season. So I'd had planned sort of 4 or 5 different episodes of the show to take in the various different exhibitions across the UK. I am frantically trying to arrange some additional bird room visits so that we've still got content to come through. So not giving up just yet, but it may well have an impact on the Canary Room episodes later on throughout October, November and December. But we'll see. It has been a monumental 6 days in the Canary Room. All of the breeding of the season is now finished, and I've removed all of the nest boxes, the nest pans. I've singled off into single cages, although there's only a few birds actually on their own. A large proportion of this year's young on the main side of the shed, just out of shot here, and also I've singled some young off on this side of the shed as well. So, you know, looking at them in smaller cages, letting them develop sort of in pairs to see how they get on. So monumental clean out of the Canary Room, as I say, has happened over 6 days, trying to fit it in between work. Thankfully Claire and the girls are away at the moment, so I've been very much left to my own devices, which has meant that I can steal shamelessly various different cleaning products and things from the kitchen, and inevitably I will you know, give a quick rinse through of the nest pans and nest boxes before they end up in the dishwasher while the cat's away, as they say. You can see behind me I've singled off, or I've put into cages some of the older Fife hens. So I've got 2 cages now, 2 big flight cages of birds with the majority of the flighted, the over-year Fifes in them. This one's got a couple of borders in as well. Feeding them, you know, lots of different things as they go through the molt. So they'll get egg foods. They've got some plenty of oyster shell grit available. I'm giving them different things in the water as well. More on that as we hit the top tips segment in a moment's time. So, you know, they're enjoying sort of life in here. Earlier in the week, I gave them some Savoy cabbage outer leaves that I washed, and I'd say, you know, never really viewed canaries as like velociraptors before, but they absolutely tore into it. It was a really lovely sight to see. So, all the birds are sort of now singled off. I've still got a number of young in the flight cages. I've got 3 double flight cages of Fifes sort of still to sort. Those are birds at different ages. You know, there's some really nice quality birds in there, and what I'm doing regularly is pulling birds out, popping them into training cages to take a closer look at them. And as I look at those birds, I look to find more room in the Canary Room to put to put them into to single cages, really. So that's what we've been doing in the last couple of weeks. As I say, it's been muck and bullets in here with a really good deep clean of all the cages after the breeding season. Much needed. You can always tell the birds. There's almost like once the environment is freshened up again, you can see the birds become more active again, and obviously that's important. The molt is a particularly challenging time for canaries, for all birds. In fact, it takes a fair amount out of them. So without further ado, it's today's top tips, and that's how to get birds successfully through the molt. So the molt, important for us to understand, is the annual replacement of feathers. There is a terminology called a soft molt, which is when you'll find that birds, having molted, will drop a few of their feathers. And that can be disastrous certainly for a breeding season. One of the important things to say is that the molt can happen sort of at any time. Here in the UK, I had birds going into the molt in July, and early July. We're in August now. I've still got birds who haven't broken into the molt yet. So the birds will not all molt out at the same time, which is something else important to consider. But how do we manage the stud through the molt time? Well, one of the first things that we do in the Canary Room at the beginning of August, in fact on August the 1st, and I sort of put that as an anchor date in if I've still got young in the nest, which I very rarely do have at that stage, but if I have still got young in the nest, I might push it back a week. But this week, 1st of August, I adjusted first and foremost the lighting in the Canary Room to help those birds that were need to go through that molt. So light can play a significant part in the molt. You can see through this shot here just how dark the Canary Room gets, despite the fact it's white cages, it's white walls, it's got a big window at the front and a big window in the door. Just how dull the Canary Room gets when there's no light in it, no artificial lighting in there. So the lighting is set up now in the Canary Room for our winter lighting. It comes on at 6 a.m. in the morning. I'm often out here in the cold winter's days at 6 o'clock, feeding and watering the birds. So it comes on at 6 o'clock in the morning and it goes off at 3:30 in the afternoon. What I'll do is I'll keep that lighting in place until around the sort of beginning of December, mid-December, when I'll start to adjust it by increasing it by 15 minutes each year. So that's our lighting. At the moment in the UK, dusk, the sun sort of goes down around 9, 9:15. So, there is still light in the Canary Room. The birds can still feed and they can still drink, but it's those nights are getting shorter. Speaking of drinks, one of the other things that I do through the molt is ensure that there is both water-soluble calcium available to the birds. And for the first time in a number of years, I'm using a product called Origo Stim again. Now, I gave it to the birds yesterday. I gave it at the same time that I finished the deep clean, so I think I did about 30 cages yesterday. So the birds look great today. Now, they've only had it for a day, so I can't imagine it's had that impact already. But Origo Stim is a product which is essentially oregano based. It's a natural product, and it is used extensively to help sort of the intestinal clean out naturally the gut in a bird. So The molt can be a very, very stressful time, and that can mean that birds are susceptible to, internal complications, nasties that they pick up. And a Rego stim, as I say, I used it a few years ago. I haven't used it for a while. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I couldn't remember why I wasn't using it. But I've bought some. I picked it up off eBay, and I'm using that again. So that, along with a calcium boost, is going in the water. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm both offering the birds baths and I'm spraying them. So they get baths on the cages once a week. And what I do is when I'll take them out of the cages, I'll give them a spray. And the spray that I'm using, it's just a garden spray, but it's also pigeon-based product to go into the water. We've seen it on earlier episodes. I used it for the first time this year, and I really rate it. I rate it quite highly. I got it from a good friend of mine in Malta when I was over there. We give plenty of oyster shell grit. That's on the floor of the cages as well. And I'm giving the birds egg food. I'm giving them egg food once every couple of days still, just to make sure that they've got everything that they need to get through the molt. The other thing that I'm doing is, having moved them all now into their cages, there's one or two that I will still move, but having moved them all into their cages, I will really make the decision not to do any more movement. So I want them to molt out in these cages. We can see that there are, different feathers. I mean, these cages were clean yesterday. You can already see from this shot here some feathers in the corner of the cage. And really, to emphasize the point, what I wanted to do is to show you 3 different birds at various different stages in the molt. So beginning of August now here in the Canary Room, what we've got here first and foremost is a self bird, and you can see this bird is it's just starting to drop a couple of feathers, but it's pretty much in nest feather at the moment. And as a consequence, you get an idea of what its nest feather shape was like, but you don't necessarily see what it's going to end up like as an adult bird. I find with my dark birds that they don't generally change too much. The light clear birds, that's a completely different story. They seem to change considerably through the molt. Second bird that you can see here, again, it's another dark. This time it's a heavily variegated. This bird is sort of deep into the molt. You can see there's a it looks like a burst mattress essentially. You can see feathers sort of starting to come through. You can see its adult plumage starting to come through. So it's a different depth of green, but there's a lot of fluffy feathers still to come here. The birds generally, as a general rule, the last thing to finish on them is their head. And as you can see with this variegated hen that we've got here, that is absolutely the case. The bird is sort of molted through its body feather, but its head still has a way to go. So just from the sort of top of the shoulders through to the head. The birds will still sort of finish off, and one of the things, an old canary tip or an old canary assertion is that we need a good frost to sort of finish the birds off. So a good frost in sort of October time, that will just harden the feathers off and give them that final finished sheen. These, of course, the birds that we've seen, they're all unflighted, and unflighted refers to the fact that they haven't dropped their tail or flight feathers, and they won't do that until they go through their first or their second molt, essentially. So they'll be, just over a year old. So we can see with some of the adult birds, they don't have tails at the moment. They've dropped their tail feathers. Those tail feathers will start to come through over the next few weeks. So that's the molt, and that's this week's top tips on how to get birds successfully through it. I mentioned at the top of the show that the remodeling of the Canary Room had begun in earnest. Now, I said last time out that I'd acquired some new wire cages, kookaburra cages from Rob Harvey Imports off eBay, available in the UK. I think a 4-stack is £99 delivered, so, you know, no significant investment. The cages arrived, and once I'd put the first one together, the others were quite easy to put together. A little bit of a shot of me putting them together now. Fortunately, it's a time lapse, so you won't have to see all of the swearing and the gnashing of teeth that went on during that. I decided to do this on what was the hottest day in the UK. So by the end of it, the perspiration was absolutely pouring out of me. And this was phase 1 of the remodeling of the Canary Room. So we've installed 5 of these cages now. We bought 4 new ones. We already had one in the Canary Room, and as I look at the stack, I've potentially got room for 1 more to go above. Phase 1 of the transformation of the Canary Room. Phase 2 and phase 3 will see the complete replacement, hopefully, of the remainder of the cages and the flights in here. So phase 2 will see the flight cages replaced. So we housed the Siberians in them this year. I built them earlier this year with Will, my son, and you know, they've served a purpose for me. They are having used them for a season, they have their limitations. So the plan for the main flight cages, they're slightly recessed, so there's a bit of privacy behind the main block of cages, so it works well for the British. Currently I had sort of 3 big flights, and then 5 flight cages and a small cage underneath. My plan is to develop those into 4 rows of flight cages. So each row will be 50 centimetres high by around about 110, 105 centimetres wide and about 33 centimetres deep. What I will be able to do is separate them off into essentially 16 individual cages, or I can open them up into 4 big flight cages. And that's really the flexibility that I want to bring in the Canary Room with them. So they're in the design process at the moment. I'm waiting on some costs to come through, and I'll have a better idea of the level of investment. The main cage block currently has 36 cages in it. Now, the vast majority of those cages are 16 inches wide by 10 inches high, and then there's a block on the end which is 14 inches wide and 10 inches high. So what that means is I can open them out into significantly big flights. What's always irritated me and my undiagnosed OCD is that I can't break them into 3 lots of doubles. It's frustrated me no end. I can't tell you how much it's frustrated me over the years, but it has massively. So one of the things that I'm looking to do is to get 6 rows of 16 by 10s, but also to incorporate drawers in them. Now, I know people have real frustrations with drawers, and that they harbour mite underneath. They do, but it's part of the cleanliness of your regime. You know, we've got another puffer on order. Regular viewers to the show will recall from season 1 or season 2, our diatomic earth puffer, which we have in the Canary Room. So that's unfortunately given up the ghost. It's perished. So we've ordered another one, and we'll be using that extensively. And that's just, mite is about management. It's about making sure that you treat the birds with, whatever mite solution you choose, and it's about ensuring that you keep your cages clean. So yes, there's places for mite to hide. Mite don't need places to hide, they'll find them. So 6 cages by 16 over there. That'll give me the chance to do some doubles, which I may well consider doing on the bottom row. Thinking about, you know, always thinking ahead for next year, always thinking ahead for next year and the year after, and I genuinely think that'll give me a greater degree of flexibility. I'm also contemplating whether, you know, rather than putting cages across the bottom, another row on the very bottom, whether I make those into sort of small flight cages. Again, you know, not very high, but just use them to overwinter birds. I certainly wouldn't breed in them; they're too low down. So the final element of our remodeling is the cages here behind me. Now, I made these last year. They do have drawers in them. I've bred in them this year. They've been invaluable to me. You know, they've been very successful. But again, there's 5 rows of double breeders, and then there's a flight cage underneath at the bottom. I haven't utilised the flight cages this year. I haven't needed to really, and they're quite difficult to get down to. As I get a little bit older, I find it difficult to get down on my knees. God love me. So what I've got here is, again, when I designed these, it was very much about getting them built, getting them done. But unfortunately, they don't all open up, so they don't give me any flexibility. So I can open them up into doubles, which is what I have done. I can single them off into singles, which is what I've done at the moment. But I can't open them up as a quad. And I'd really like to be able to do that. So again, it's just about thinking about the canary room, thinking about the usage of the cages over the course of the season. So, you know, how you're going to molt birds out. At the moment, we've got more birds in here than we will ever have. So, you know, having these as flexible cages is useful. You know, if I could open this up into a 4, it would probably be even more useful for me. So those are the plans. They are, you know, very much in development. As I say, waiting on a few prices back. But the first thing that we've done is that we've moved all of the British. So it's that time, of course. It's Redpoll Diaries. So one of the first things that we did when we installed these new kookaburra cages was took the opportunity to move all of the British finches. You know, we had a particularly hot day, and the couple of Isabels that we had, they were on blue rings. Just seem to deteriorate really quickly, and when birds, you know, start to go down, it can be very difficult to bring them back. One of the Siberians I've got, which I believe is a hen, she's not looked fantastic. She didn't look fantastic before the move, but what these cages do give for me is the opportunity. The droppings go straight through. There's a tray at the bottom, as you can see here, which is if I lift this up, this is easily pulled out and easily cleaned. So what we've got with the British is you know, some thoughts for next year about what we'll need, what we want to bring in. We bred 2 lesser redpolls split for pied. So we've got 2 young there. We've still got the pied hen, which is their mother. We've got a couple of, we've got the silver hen. So I'm really mulling around for the Redpoll Diaries next year of what I do, what I bring in by way of redpolls. I think that what I may do is look to breed the poles actually in these cages next year. I'm umming and ahhing at the moment. The flight cages at the back, that will give us essentially 8 big flight cages. They'll be able to split into 16. They'll split into 4 really big flight cages. With the goldfinches, I've currently got 5 Siberian goldfinches now. I've got the bird of the week, which we'll see in a minute, which I think is a Umo, which I bred this year. I've got a Lutino, which I bred this year. I will DNA sex both of those. And actually, for my own curiosity, I might DNA sex the other Lutino that I've got. I understand it's a hen. It wasn't paired up, it didn't lay. So I'll DNA sex that just to be sure. And then I will, I'll look to acquire, either another pair, probably another trio, so I can mix and match. I've got my eye on some pied Siberian goldfinches, if I can bring those in. It's not an inconsiderable investment, so I'll with doing the cages this year, this is a hobby after all, so it's not as anyone will tell you who keeps birds, it's not a profitable hobby. So I've got to think about the level of investment. I will have surplus birds to sell this year, and they will cover some of the cost of the new cages and potentially some of the cost of bringing in new birds as well. The other plans really, so I'll be looking to bring in some visual pied red poles if I can. I'm on the hunt for a linnet cock if I can get one. And my plan is also to try and acquire a couple of pairs of Norwich canaries. I've had a conversation with a good friend of mine about that, and hopefully that will come into fruition. The linnet cock, as I say, if I can acquire one, the plan will be to do some muling with him. I have a goldfinch cock here, still a pea-throat goldfinch cock. My plan with him, I've already earmarked an Irish fancy hen, which I've contacted a friend of mine about, and he said he'll sort me out with one of those. So I'll look to do some mini muling with the Irish fancy hen. It will be a yellow feathered bird. So we'll see if we can bring that in later in the year. So the new cages for the British are working really well. I'd realised when I was putting them together that I'd not put the seed hoppers together properly on the original cages, so I've rectified that now. Key really, get them through the molt. Get them through the molt without any further losses. Inevitably there will be some losses, and that's one of the things that we have to just accept when we keep livestock. Very, very difficult to accept at times, because it's always your favourite bird or the best bird in your shed that seems to fall off the perch. But that is this week's Red Pole Diaries. Coming up, well, it's Bird of the Week. I've been slightly nervous about this Bird of the Week for a while now, and it is our Siberian goldfinch, the second of the Siberian goldfinches that we bred here in the Canary Room this year. I think, looking at the sort of size and dominance of this bird, I think it's going to be a cock. Now, wouldn't that just be perfectly worked out if the Lutino that I got turned out to actually be a hen? It was bought as a hen. I think it's a hen. And this bird turned out to be a Umo, and it will be split Lutino. That would be incredible, because that would mean that I had two pairs of, Umo split cocks with Lutino hens, and that would just, for my OCD more than anything else, that would just be ideal. And then we've got, as I say, we've got another Lutino hen there. But this bird is, it was reared by the Agat mosaics, the pair of Agat mosaics. It is feeding itself. It is taking hard seed, although I am still giving it soak seed, and I'm giving it egg food daily basis. So we'll see how it turns out. It's interesting to see the sort of the dark, the yellow feathers on the flanks and on the wings rather, and the dark feathers coming through. It hasn't got its mask as yet, so we'll see what happens with that over the course of the next few weeks. But that is this week's Bird of the Week. I really appreciate all of the questions that come into the show. On Question Time this week, it's a great contributor to the show, Debbie Stout. Debbie's over in the US. And Debbie asks a number of questions in her post, but questions I think that are really pertinent. How did the crazy year change breeding? How are the breeders staying connected with other canary people? Is the crazy situation making it hard for breeders to make trades or purchases from each other? Are plans for new stock possible, or are they put on hold? And how will you find a way to get new redpolls, mosaics or canaries for mulling if needed? How has the supply of seed been affected? Several suppliers not making deliveries to clubs as they did in the past. Well, wide-ranging questions, Debbie, but fantastic questions and very relevant. So thank you for taking the time to contact me to ask them. Well, the breeding season, it would seem, as is always the case, has been mixed for everybody. Certainly here in the Canary Room, been an outstanding season with the Fifes, with the borders, with the agate mosaics. Couldn't have asked for more. The redpolls and the Siberian goldfinches. Well, I've got a couple of each of young, so never about numbers really with those birds, about quality and about getting some young. First time I've ever bred goldfinches, so delighted with that. But hearing very much mixed reports across the UK. Some people have had a really difficult season, and some people have had a really good season. For those of us who are working full time, certainly being on lockdown and being away from the office has helped, and it's helped massively. When it comes to the sort of keeping in contact, well, the Fife Fancy Federation had set up a WhatsApp group, which has been a source of amusement for many months. So different people engaged in that and chatting through that. Early on in the season, we did a number of Zoom calls, so probably a dozen or so different Zoom calls from different bird rooms, and seeing how things were going there. The acquisition and disposal of stock is going to be a challenge, no doubt about that. The shows largely are, as well as places where you can meet fanciers and show your birds, they're a place where you can distribute your birds. You can take stock, and I will normally deliver birds that have been ordered to the various different shows across the country. I show in the northeast, in the Midlands, in the northwest, and occasionally up in Scotland and in the southeast of the UK. So I travel to show or to judge extensively across the UK, and that presents the opportunity to deliver birds to individuals where they at those shows, and it's looking like that opportunity isn't going to be there, certainly in the level that it was or has been in previous years. There are couriers here in the UK operating between the UK and Ireland, and very effective couriers. I'm always a bit wary, about how the birds are transported. That's no slight on any of those couriers, but I know if I've acquired birds, I want to pick them up myself. I want to see them. I don't really want them to be couriered to me, but this year I might not have a choice. I remain in contact with a number of friends in the fancy who keep a variety of different breeds. Obviously, my good friend Julian with his reds and the grey wings. I'm hoping to go and do another visit to Julian and do another show from there. He looks like he's had a phenomenal season, so in that visit I'm also hoping to go back to Yorkie Supreme in the next couple of months. So in that visit to Julian, you know, hopefully I'll be able to pick up a couple of pairs while I'm there. The rest of the stuff really, Debbie, you know, will be potentially about putting plans on hold. And, you know, if we have to wait a year to get the birds that we want, then I'll exercise the patience required. And your final point on seed is a really good one. There was a time earlier in the season where people were stockpiling seed and it became difficult to get hold of. That doesn't seem to be as much of an issue now. So I use a number of different seed suppliers. I get the same seed, but I use a number of different seed suppliers, and I've had an uninterrupted supply. And that's being delivered to my door. One of the big challenges with Stafford as a show being cancelled is that's when I would normally get all of my nesting material and egg food for the year ahead. So that's going to have to be ordered online this time round and sent to the house, but that's no great problem. So Debbie, as always, thank you very much for your questions. Some really, really good questions this week. And so listen, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks very much for watching the show. If you're able to hit the donate button and make a contribution to the channel, it's very, very much appreciated. It helps cover some of the costs that I incur putting the show together. In the next couple of episodes, hopefully we will be on the road, and hopefully the next episode of the Canary Room will be on the road. That should be out around towards the back end of August. As always, until next time, take care.